Everybody talks about first round picks in Dynasty, but what really makes a Dynasty owner or a Dynasty GM elite is how they use their seconds, thirds, and even fourth round picks. And this is something I think that we would admit we've had to change our stance on since we started doing this. We had an original stance. We were wrong about that stance, and we've since adjusted because of this research right here. And so let's talk about seconds and thirds, particularly thirds in this video, but seconds as well, and kind of what you should expect from these picks, because we say this a lot. Every rookie pick is essentially a lottery pick, right? It has X% chance of hitting, and you know, it either will or it won't, and there's really not a whole lot you can do to predict which ones will and won't. We do the best we can through, you know, different methods of research and things like that, analytical profiles of prospects. Still, there is a pretty wide variety of randomness to this research, and so let's talk about the second. And in the second round, like how many of these prospects hit in the second round? And like, let's classify what an actual hit is. A hit is probably somebody you can start in Dynasty, right? So that'd be, you know, for example, running back 30 or better for the last 2 years, or a current top 24 running back. Okay, so we're talking like between a running back 2, running back 3. Again, somebody you can plug into your lineup we'd classify as a hit, right?
Well, and think about it too, for those late rounds assets too, specifically at the running back position. If you draft a running back in the late second, third, fourth round, and they end up producing as a top 30 running back, that's a massive value win.
It is.
So it's not that high of a bar.
So it's not. That's a hit, right? When we talk about elite guys, we're talking about a running back or wide receiver 10 or higher season, basically. So a running back or wide receiver 1. And a running back or wide receiver 30 for at least 2 or more years. So let's get those definitions out of the way. How many of these rookies actually hit in the second round? Rookies taken there typically have about a 1/3 hit rate, meaning, you know, 1/3 of those assets in the second round get to the point where they're consistent. You can consistently start them in your Dynasty lineups, right? Usually it's anywhere from 3 to 6 guys in any given year that are going to be startable on a year-to-year basis that you draft in the second round, okay? And so we're going to talk about the differences in the ranges of second-round picks as well. But in terms of their elite rate, again, so that's going to be, are they a running back or wide receiver 1 at some point? It's about 12.5% here. And so this is pretty consistent with what we talked about last year. We did a video with this data already once last year. We're just breaking it down, taking a smaller portion of this and looking specifically at the later rounds. A 12.5% elite rate. And again, I think, you know, there's a pretty big drop-off like you see from round 1 to round 2 here. You're looking at this table. It goes from 70% startable in round 1 to 33% in round 2. It goes from 45% elite to 12.5% in round 2. And so there are pretty big drop-offs here. And so all things considered, you know, in any given rookie draft, typically around 1.5 on average in the second round will be elite guys. So there's, you know, probably a 1 in 12 chance you have on hitting on an elite guy in the second. And then about 3 will be startable, and then the rest of them will be misses on average, okay? So obviously a very clear drop from round 1 to round 2. Now round 2 to round 3 is a little bit different here when you're looking at this data.
Yeah, so rookies that are taken in the third rounds actually, surprisingly enough, have about a 25% hit rate. And again, when you think about it, when we're talking about a hit rate here for these guys in the third round, it's not a super high bar. It's very achievable for them to reach that level, reach that production rate in their rookie season, their second season or whatever, and have a massive value win. I mean, it's about a 25% hit rate in the third round for those rookies that go in that range. A consistent spread of about 2 to 4 assets going every single year in the third round end up being significant value wins for you and your team when you take a shot on them. Now, we're going to break this down by position later in this video, but we'll get to that later. I do want to touch on the elite rate, though, for the general rookies in this range. It's about 10%. Like Avery already said, it jumps, or it goes down quite a bit from first round to second round. But when you compare rounds 2 and rounds 3 specifically and their elite rates, the guys that produce consistently for multiple years, again, not at a crazy high level, but enough where they are actually valued as generally a top 6 dynasty asset. In the second round versus the third round, not that much of a difference, only a 2.5% difference. That's about 1 player per year max. So you're looking at that and you're like, dang, that's actually not too bad when when you're looking at investing in potentially third round picks for a fraction of the price of second round picks. So I think this is really going to be the main focus today. I mean, second round picks, I think at this point, a lot of people kind of gauge the value of second round picks correctly and accordingly, and they kind of have a good idea of how many of those guys generally are going to hit. Maybe you don't have the numbers right in your head. We have them here for you, but you generally have a good idea of like, hey, the chances of a second round pick hitting compared to a first round hit are drastically or significantly less. But I don't know if I don't know if many people know the difference between seconds and thirds, and that's really what we want to focus on here. I don't think third round picks should be viewed as throwaways, like a lot of people do, especially when you get to this time in the offseason when they still are being treated as throwaways. When you've got a third round pick that you have to throw in the middle of a season as a contender, by all means, give away the third round pick. It's not doing anything for you in your contention status whatsoever. These third round picks matter. They absolutely do right now. And if you're down tiering from one pick to another and it's only a couple spots apart and you're still within a tier and you get a couple thirds on top, you get a late second, you get a couple thirds on top, like that is relevant when you're talking about the differences in hit rates between the second and third round here. They are very valuable lottery tickets, just as valuable as second round picks. And we've been proponents of second round picks in 2025. I think the same's going to apply to third round because of the historical hit rates for that range.
Yeah, and I think a good example of how I've practically implemented this research in the past year is when I've done my startup drafts and we're past the 13th round, I will take third round picks every single pick pretty much, because really what we're going to talk about, and stick with us, because if you've got seconds, thirds, or fourths, we're going to tell you exactly what to do with them this year, exactly how you should be moving them around, exactly who you should be taking, who you should be trading them for, all that. So stay tuned for the whole video. It's going to be chock full of information. I take thirds because, again, they're like Nathan said, they're lottery tickets, but they're lottery tickets that are, the odds are comparable to round 2 lottery tickets. And so let's talk. It does change per position though, and we should touch on that next. Let's start with wide receiver first. Wide receiver, when you're looking at, like the first round, the hit rates for the wide receivers in the first round are about 50%, okay? That's pretty low, but you'll know there have been plenty of first-round wide receivers, Treylon Burks, Quentin Johnson, I've come out in the last couple of years that just straight up haven't hit, right? So we have those guys. It's definitely not a perfect science, and again, you do have about a 50% rate. In round 2, you go from a 50% hit rate in the top 4 of the first round, 45% in the rest of round 1, to a 45% in round 2, meaning there's not really a significant drop-off in wide receiver hit rates in round 2. Whereas round 2 to round 3 for wide receivers is cut in half. You get to 20% hit rate. And so for wide receivers especially, this actually does elevate the value of second-round picks in particular. There's one problem contextually when you're looking at this year's class especially. This year's wide receiver class is not near as good as the running back class. So right off the bat, you can see where I'm going with this. It should tell you that second round picks should be used, especially this year, for running back. And also, second round picks and third round picks are going to be a little bit more valuable, in my opinion, this year because of the running back heaviness of the class. So again, in the third round, you get from that, you get to that 20% hit rate, a 7% elite rate. And so it's, again, you really, at this point when you're drafting wide receivers, it's mostly draft capital dependent, but you've even seen these first round wide receivers leak into the second round. And so, not as much of a drop off from round 1 to round 2, but a pretty big drop off from round 2 to round 3. Now let's go to running backs, okay? So in the first round, top 4 running backs, 80% hit rate. If you've got a running back going in the top 4 dynasty drafts, they're going to hit. The rest of the first round, it drops pretty significantly. It gets cut in half, 45%. So those fringe, like late first round running backs that we're going to be looking at this year, depending on where they go, right? But if we have guys, like 3 or 4 running backs that slide into the 108 to 112 range or something like that, their hit rate is significantly less than the hit rate of somebody like Genty or Omarion Hampton. We've already talked about it. Those guys are essentially risk-free. Like, they are going to hit if they're going top 4. But the rest of the first round gets a little bit muckier. Now, the second and third round goes from 45% hit rate to 30% hit rate in the second round for running backs. And then from second to third round goes from 30% hit rate to 27% hit rate.
Oh.
And the elite rate goes from 10% to 12%. So the odds are pretty much exactly the same for running back hits between round 2 and round 3. This should catch your attention. Right? The elite running backs are pretty predictable. Again, very high hit rate at the beginning of the first round. However, between second and third round running backs, they're analytically, in terms of their hit rates, when you're drafting one of these, there pretty much isn't a difference. You should find the profile you like with these running backs, and you should take a swing.
And why is that the case practically? Like, let's think about this practically. Why is that generally the case? Because almost any day 2 running back that you can think of, almost, not every single one, but most day 2 running backs end up going where in your dynasty rookie drafts?
Day 2, typically into the first.
Usually no later than the end of the first. So you're stuck with this massive range, this massive bank of day 3 running back values that are, really, historically speaking, don't really have as good a chance as any other to hit, from like a 5th round guy to a 7th round guy. So what ends up happening in the 2nd round versus the 3rd round with those running backs, assuming that they're all day 3 picks, the ones going in the 2nd are the ones that are being overvalued and elevated because of their situation.
Typically, that's correct.
That's usually the case. And I think what we're seeing from this data is that it's not really even situation that matters here. It's basically just if there's a day 3 running back available in the 3rd round that was pushed down because he didn't have as ideal of a situation as someone who ended up going in the middle of the 2nd, who also went day 2, you need to take a shot on him anyways.
And so, one of the more practical things we can tell you right away in this video is in the 3rd round, in the 3rd round, I would not be taking wide receiver. The hit rates are not good for wide receiver here, and I would be taking running back here. So what's what we talk about? Like you're gonna see this. We're gonna see this when we are giving out rookie draft advice. Like the 3rd round, 4th round strategy. Sorry, I can't talk, but the 3rd, 4th round strategy a lot of times for us is pick as many running backs as you can. And you look at tight ends, there's really nothing that changes here. There's really not a ton of data for tight ends, but basically it goes like this.
If the value's there, take them.
If they're in the 1st round, great. If they're in the 2nd round, typically great. If they're in the 3rd, no.
Don't touch them.
No.
I think we made this mistake with Eric All last year.
We've made this mistake, in my opinion,
we made this mistake with a lot of tight ends that fall to the 3rd round. If they fall to the 3rd round, they're going there for a reason, and they probably don't have enough value upside to really comfortably take a shot on them and think that you're actually going to get a massive value win anywhere in the near future. I think another good takeaway here from not just the running backs, but with the wide receivers. I mean, there is a notable difference between the hit rate for wide receivers versus running backs in the 2nd round. We've kind of been talking down on wide receivers a bit in this video because of specifically the 3rd round hit rate comparisons between running backs and wide receivers and how little there really is a difference between the 2nd and 3rd for running backs specifically. But with wide receivers, a 45% hit rate, that's almost a 50% hit rate for any wide receiver that you're taking in that range is you're going to get a value win from, which is very, very significant. Now you want to think contextually too this year. Of all the years that you would expect that to be lower, what year would you expect that to be? Probably 2025, yeah. Especially in a class where you've got a ton of running backs that are going in that range. I think this is one of those years where you're like, okay, this is where context does matter, and this is where data really helps. Analytics are very helpful, but we're not 100% analytically driven. We do care about situational dynasty fantasy football, and we are understanding, we are attentive to what the landscape looks like this year for the rookie prospects, specifically at the wide receiver position. So be aware of that, but also please be aware that everyone every single year is looking for not the next Isaiah Pacheco, who was a huge value win, not the next Zamir White, who was a 6-month value win there for a little bit of a stretch. Yeah. They're looking for the next Puka Nacua. And I'm telling you guys, there is not a next Puka, not only because very few wide receivers are like Puka, but because analytically, it is the least likely thing to happen based on what we're seeing here. That's just a fact. We really liked Puka Nacua as a prospect, and low-key victory laps when he ended up hitting. I can't lie to you. If I had to go back and do it again, if I went back and did it again with this knowledge, I would not have taken a shot on Puka Nacua. And I would have ended up being wrong about it. Woe is me, boo-hoo. But we really got lucky with Puka. We absolutely did. And when you're looking at the historical data here, guys, I think you're wasting your breath and wasting your time if you're going to exhaust hours and hours of analysis trying to figure out who the next Puka is in the 3rd and 4th round of your dynasty rookie drafts. Just spend them on day 3 running backs. You got nothing to lose, and you have more to gain.
That is fantastic advice. You should listen to him. He's exactly right. I want to look at this graph too. This is the average Cornerstone rate by pick. The Cornerstone rate basically being, we classify our Cornerstone assets. What's the technical definition? ADP of 65 or more that are, younger than, you've seen our Cornerstone rankings, 25 typically and younger. When you're looking at the average Cornerstone rate, and these picks were grouped in threes here, so like picks 1 through 3, 4 through 6, 7 through 9. What you'll notice is there are really 3 zones where it kind of plateaus here. And we can take away these observations from this data here when you're looking at the Cornerstone hit rate by the range of picks. Number 1, top 6 picks especially are elite. They should be treated that way. Basically, here's what we're going to get at here is what you should do with your existing rookie picks. if you're going to trade into the first round with multiple seconds, I'm not opposed to that, but you need to probably make sure you're getting into the top 6. I'm not really interested in packaging multiple early seconds for a late first, and here's why. You can see the picks 7 through 9 and the picks 13 through 15 Cornerstone hit rate, which hover right at 45%-ish. They're exactly the same from pick 7 to pick 15, meaning what? The picks 107 through 203 in terms of will this asset be a cornerstone of my dynasty team? Will it be a value hit? There's pretty much no difference. So with that being said, early seconds, we said this last year, they should be treated like late first-round picks. Because the hit rates on them are pretty much identical. Mm-hmm. The other thing here is particular for the second and the third round. The 204, the 205, the hit rates there are pretty much the same as the 212. And so if you can down tier from those picks and get, if you're just outside of that range, you're at 205, 206, and you can get to the 212 plus get a couple thirds or something on top, doing it. 100% doing it. Either that, if you're in the middle of the second, moving back is a good idea, or moving up, because again, the hit rates of the 201, 202, which these are typically value fallers that get into the second round because other people elevate, these prospects from that should be in the second round into the first, and then you have Brock Bowers falling to you, you have Bo Nix falling to you, right? And that's not going to be last year's class, but you get the idea. So you either A, if you're in the middle of the second, A, trade back into the late second, early third, and get some thirds on top. B, trade into the early second as well. And so maybe if you have some seconds, that's kind of what you're doing with your picks this year. But the other thing is, and this is probably the most practical advice we'll give you, is go stack third round picks. Go get them. Here's what you should be telling yourself. Because when I'm looking at this data, and a third rounder has 25% startable rate, 25%. We're not pulling this data out of our butts, guys. This is dating back to, I think, 2020, maybe further than that. We had Chip do this for us. Shout out to Chip. But 25% startable rate. Let's look at the guys going in the second round. And I have this on here, by the way. Let's look at the guys going in the second round, the third round around the 301, and talk about if these guys actually have a chance at being startable.
Yeah, this is a fun exercise because I think there are a number of guys in here that are actually very interesting that maybe I would prefer over the thirds, but there are a number. Quentin Johnson at this point, they've already replaced him once. There's no indication that they wouldn't replace him twice over and go get another wide receiver at some point. Right. Tank Dell just had a devastating injury. Honestly, I might have a different opinion if it weren't for the fact that he literally obliterated his knee. At the point that he comes back healthy, he's going to be approaching the end of his rookie deal after an injury, and it's probably going to take him a full year once he actually plays to even resemble what he was as a rookie. I'm not counting on that at all. I would take a third round pick. Sue me.
I'm with you.
Tank Bigsby, literally Travis Etienne was so bad that Tank Bigsby got opportunity, and Tank Bigsby was just as bad and just as inefficient. He was awful. Give me the third round pick. Isaiah Likely, man, that was a fun first game in 2024. So dang close. He should not have worn black cleats. You also should not prefer him over the 301 in Dynasty Fantasy Football. I think at this point, with Mark Andrews really looking a lot better at the end of the season compared to how he did at the start, and most of that being because of the injury that he had previously that was pretty rough at the end of the 2023 season. I just don't understand why people are so enamored consistently with Isaiah Likely. Jake Ferguson, good gosh. He's just now shown for multiple years that he does not have elite tight end one upside, and it's because of his lack of usage really in the red zone.
And I forgot to mention this, but I just don't want to see this one in the comments because this is one we get sometimes. These not only are realistic values. Where I got this data is it's available to you on the site. This is a compilation of 8 live real money startup drafts. So these are drafts that actually happened.
Like money where mouth is at.
This is the result. This is the aggregate result of those drafts. And so this is not only accurate, this is how people are drafting and have drafted in the last month in Dynasty. So when you say Marvin Mims, is Marvin Mims really going between the 301 and 302? Yes, I have the drafts I will show you. I will show you 8 of the drafts and show you that he's going in that range. Marvin Mims is not going to be somebody you're starting on your fantasy team. Some of these could be receipts. Rashad Bateman, I think he was flexible this last year. Yeah. Blake Corum and Braylon Allen. What are the odds? I think they're slim. I'd probably take my chance, a 25% chance. Do I think it's above or lower than that? I'd probably put it around 20%. So, I mean, you're probably just flipping your asset at that point and going and getting a third, and you're going to have the same hit rate. I mean,
Jalen Wright's a guy that really debatably you could hold, and I would totally understand it because he's behind a running back who consistently misses time every single year, and he's a smaller guy. And Raheem Mostert just left that offense, so he's seen a little bit of a value bump. But again, with these running backs, they're not pretty running backs, Corn, Braylon Allen, and Jalen Wright. You are betting that they are going to have an opportunity to eventually start and take over that role to actually sustain what their value actually ends up jumping up to when they do get that opportunity for a couple of weeks. And Braylon Allen's behind Breece Hall for the next couple of years. And again, Jalen Wright is going to be behind Achane because he's just not as talented. Cade Otton, who had really the season of all seasons because Godwin went down with an injury and Mike Evans was out on IR for a significant amount of time as well. I still would prefer the early third there. Christian Kirk, who basically is having like his last hurrah in Houston. I think that's kind of being a little overplayed. In my opinion, I think people are just assuming that he's going to be utilized just like Stephon Diggs was last season before the ACL tear. And really, what is that production upside and capability? Christian Kirk is not as good of a wide receiver.
And honestly, like I think the best case you could make for like keeping players instead of sitting thirds are the veterans that are undervalued because either A, they're in decline, or B, you know, the situation.
I think like Rashad Bateman is probably the biggest.
Rashad Bateman here. Yeah. I think Christian Kirk, you can make an argument for it. Guys like Russell Wilson in a Superflex league, I think you can make an argument for it. But you know, when you get down to the 303, this is only the early third.
You can make an argument for Evan Ingram.
I would definitely send.
I would prefer Evan Ingram.
Evan Ingram. But like getting down here into like after the 303 here, Freiermuth, Brooks, Wandale, Brown, Algier, Garendo. I'm not starting these guys. I'm trading them for thirds. And so really, again, here's what I would encourage you guys to do as we wrap this up. I would encourage you to I have the ADP posted on the site. It's being updated. Shout out Dylan. It's being updated every time we do a draft. We just did a draft Monday night. Go through this list of ADP, the Live League ADP. You attach a screenshot of where it's at. Look at the guys going value adjacent to thirds in Dynasty and consider trading them away for thirds if you think A, they have a less than 25% chance of starting on their team, or B, you don't think they have any hope at all. Trade them for thirds. Like, again, looking even further down this list, Ben Sinnott, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs at this point, Rico Dowdle. Rico Dowdle's not even on a team yet, is he? Like, I don't even think he's been signed.
I think he went to Carolina.
Did he?
Yeah.
Go to the Live League ADP and go through this list and see which guys you should be moving off your roster for thirds. It will help you not only clean up your roster, right? Because cleaning up your roster is important, especially before the draft. You're going to need those roster spots. It's also going to get you some very valuable lottery tickets for your team. This is what we're doing with third round picks this year. And I hope this was helpful in terms of clearing up some of the, the fuzziness around what they're actually worth, what the hit rate actually is, and I hope this opened your eyes to the actual value of third round picks in Dynasty. So make sure you drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed as well if you play Dynasty. We can help you. We can help you decide which assets to ship for a third, which assets you shouldn't ship for a third. We can help you decide that at flockfantasy.com/domain. You get full access to our Discord with a ton of people over there playing Dynasty now, but you get a free team blueprint as well when you sign up using code domain to the annual Motherflocker tier. So Nathan and I will look at your team, and again, we can tell you personally what we think you should do with your roster. And we do this. This is what we do at this point all the time now, and we love doing it. So like I said, get a free one. Use code domain. Link's going to be in the description. But we appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.